Hi folks, so I am testing out a brand new camera here, so forgive me because I might have some hiccups along the way. This is kind of the one-man band show over here. But I wanted to give you some updates that we have in the landscape that's happening. Yes, it's been absolutely frigid out. It's been hard to walk around this whole area because it's just been above freezing, like below and above freezing every single day. So the whole ground is an ice slick because everything is freezing and then melting, freezing and melting, freezing and melting. But I wanted to give you some progress updates because there is a lot that's been happening in the landscape. So let me see if I could turn this camera around and show you. Oh, wrong way. We're going to be taking a little walk today over behind the large pond, which we call Half Lake. It's been frozen for the past probably couple weeks. So we started to work behind here because there were a lot of trees that we had to remove that were dead or dying that could potentially fall on a new fence, which is what kind of transpired. We're getting the rest of the new fence. So our fence has been completely down, as you could see. Here's some trees that have been felled by our friend Jason, and we said, you know what, now is the time for us to take out some of the Japanese honeysuckles and the multiflora rose that are around this pond because we could actually walk on it. And what Sandra and I did is one night we took all of that multiflora rose and honeysuckle and this whole area back here. I'll show you what the view looks like from here. This is where we think we'd like to do a tea house, kind of jutting into the water. The ducks and the turtles like to sit back here too. There's one of our duck houses right there. Anyway, this whole area was covered in honeysuckle and multiflora rose, and we removed a lot of that. I mean, most of it was just cut. It's not like we could pull it out from the ground. You can see that this is cut. So we're either going to have to dig it out or just dab a little bit of Roundup there. But we did a big burn and we got rid of a lot of it. It was the perfect time to burn because it's just ice on the ground. It took a while for us to start the fire. But unfortunately we had to take down a lot of trees. You know, this was forest before, and then unfortunately maybe 70 years ago it was all cut back, cut down for grazing, and it kind of left us with unfortunately a pretty unhealthy forest. So we're hoping to get that back. I mean, it's been kind of sad because our neighbors had some really beautiful forest and they've just been clear cutting it. 150-year-old trees. Really sad for us to see. It actually hurts us. We kind of cried about it. It hurts us in the inside because we know that this forest would have been magnificent if it was basically cut properly or managed properly, and it hadn't been. So we'll probably never get to see it be magnificent. But this is a really nice view, and this area we're thinking of developing. I'm going to go in the forest and we'll see if we can find Sonder, because he's been removing a lot of the old fence that was here. So basically, this area will be all encased in a fence, so maybe we'll have some forestry growth. Because if deer are inside your fence and they're just eating constantly, I'll show you some deer browse in a little bit. But if they're eating constantly, you just never have regrowth. So that's what we're hoping to do. So you'll see this area, we have a lot of red flags. You can see all throughout here. So these are big honeysuckles and multiflora roses that we took out. Just all in due time. So you can see that this would normally be water, but now it's ice. So I think I could walk on it. I'm And look at this expanse. It's like almost 3 acres of water, so you get the sense of how much is out here that you really can't build on because it's just water. Oh man, you're on the other side.
All right, so I'm behind the large pond here, and I am removing the old deer fence that's probably been here for like 30 years. And they use this welded wire stuff that's completely rusted out now. And the deer basically show up here and they choose a spot and they just bust through this fence and they get in. So no matter how many times we try to patch this, the deer will just eventually find their way in, and then we're, you know,
At the mercy of the deer.
Then the whole fence doesn't work. So what they did is they actually, instead of using posts, which is what you would ideally do, is they used trees back here that and stapled right to it, as you can see here.
Oh, that poor black birch.
And you know, that's great on day one, but as 30 years goes by, that entire fence is in the middle of the tree because the tree has grown. You know, look at the barbed wire here. It's going through the center of the tree almost.
Oh.
It's just these giant wounds.
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm removing all this fence and I clip as much as I can, and hopefully the tree will like restore somehow. But I don't think this will ever go away. You'll always see this. But my idea now is using trees as posts is a good idea because they're really strong and they can't just easily tip over or fall. Especially on corners, it's really helpful to have something really stable to stretch the fence to, because the fence is under a lot of tension. Use like a machine or like a ratchet to really, like a come-along tool, to really put a lot of tension on the fence. And you know, you need something strong to hold that tension. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna still use some of these as posts because, you know, they're just right here. But I'm gonna put like a 2x6 board against this, a pressure treated board. And I'm gonna use only 3 screws to tie it to the tree. And the screws are really long so that as the tree grows, it pushes the board out and it rides on the screws, basically. The screws will stick out a little bit, and then it will have like a couple inches more to grow. Hopefully that will work better, or maybe not. Maybe it will swallow the 2x6
Well,
too.
you said the other day that you had those little eye hooks in there, and it swallowed it about a quarter inch
Yeah,
in a
so
year,
here,
right?
that was actually this tree.
Oh.
Now you can see, like I made some fence repairs here about 2 years ago, and I put staples into the tree, and you can see that the tree has grown almost half an inch since then, and I had to really dig out the staples. And yeah, we don't want that anymore. Now you can see it's like some areas here, the fence was going around a bunch of trees, but then I decided to use some posts and just straighten a section. So because they're using trees, the fence is going all like this, and it's better to have just a straight section of fence.
So are these ones that you put in, or are these ones that were here already?
These I put in like 2 years ago because this whole section here was compromised. And like here's, for example, a tree that died and it snapped right there.
Oh man, right above the fence.
So we got to cut this out. The problem with cutting it too is now there's metal in the, you know, your chainsaw.
How come we didn't see this with Jason?
This is fine. I could take this down.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a small tree. And I don't, like, we need to pay him to take those kinds of trees down, like the giant trees.
Yeah, the big one
that are back there.
All right, so you're taking down all this old rusty fence. We're going to reuse this fence. You'll see you rolled it up really nicely.
Yes, so some sections are actually, like some of them I have to cut up into little pieces to get them out of here. This was for this long stretch, and because they use staples, I don't need to, because these were against the post, they weren't inside the tree. I could actually recover a large section of it. And we'll use this, we'll cut this up into smaller pieces and make circles out of them to put over trees that are like outside our fence. So if we see a tree outside the fence that we don't want to get deer browsed, we could make a tiny fence around that tree until it's big enough so that the deer will leave it alone. So that's our idea of reusing this. Well, after this project, we should have a complete deer fence that will last us at least another 30 to 40 years. And if it breaks, it should be easy to fix. Whereas some of this before, it was hard to fix. Like, I decided to use these posts because as you can see, they're still stable enough. Like, they're stable enough for a line post, which is a post that just holds up the fence. It doesn't necessarily have any forces pushing it over. And these are not completely rotten out yet. Like, these are still really good.
Yeah.
There's also something about the pressure treated wood they made 30 years ago that lasts a lot longer than what they put in today. So some of these posts are still valuable. It would suck to throw them away. And it would cost a lot of money to replace them. But the idea is to put the fence up for now. And as these start to go in the future, we can come in with metal posts and just basically put a metal post against the existing fence and just drive it in with a driver and then attach it to the metal post. And then the metal posts will outlast the wooden posts. Like, you know, they'll last for so much longer. So unless we decide to reroute the fence somewhere else, but I think this is a pretty good spot for it. And this fence here will be 6 foot with 3 lines. We could have done 8 foot, but I feel like these lines are really good for catching trees if they ever fall on this fence. So
are we keeping the barbed wire? Or are we taking it off?
We're not keeping the barbed wire. We're gonna keep it. We're gonna make it this stuff here. This is another section that got compromised 2 years ago that I fixed. You can see here we're using what's it called?
I could barely see it.
High tensile wire. Yeah, it's gonna be hard to see.
Yep.
So this is high tensile wire, and they got these little ratchet things that you can use to tension it. And then again, that's also very handy to have those in here because then if they ever sag, I could put more tension on them. If a tree ever falls on them, I can use those to like repair it. So that's where we're at. But it's over 2,000 feet of fence.
It's the last hurrah. It's the last bit of fence that we're going to be doing here.
Yeah, and it's easy to say, let's just put up a new fence. But when you think about the cost per linear foot of fence, it's if you do that times 2,000, like you'll be like it's insane how much money it would cost. So that's why we're doing also a lot of the work ourselves. We're taking down the old fence ourselves because like the terrain here, it's not really, you know, who wants to do this? So.
All right, so after this, we should have about 20 acres and fenced, and that will allow us to have some forest regeneration. We had a lot of bad deer browse this winter. It didn't help that the snow fell pretty early this year, and we've just had an open buffet for deer because we've had to take all this fence down. So I'll show you some of that deer browse on some of the trees and shrubs. So I don't know, this spring might be a little iffy. I mean, we have a lot of trees and shrubs that are enclosed in some of those fences that Sandra was showing you. We were already using a lot of those because we knew we'd have to take the fence down, but there are some that, you know, unfortunately, I don't know if they could be saved or not. So I'll show you those. We may have to replace them down the line, but we don't want to replace anything until the new fence is up, which Sandra and the guys are working really hard at. And then I'm going to show you some other things in the landscape that we're working on as well that are kind of exciting, but they just weren't expected. But it was all because we were replacing this fence, and so we're like, why don't we just actually tackle these projects already? It's an example of some of the
Yeah,
fences.
so these are some of the sections that I cut out that are smaller, actually. These will result in probably like 2 feet diameter fences. So we'll cut them once more like this, and that will be a 2 feet diameter by 3 feet tall fence. And then a lot of the other sections are 160 inches long, and they'll result in maybe like a 4 feet diameter, and we could leave those 6 feet tall for bigger trees. But yeah, I'm just loading these up. I think the best way to store these is flat, and some of them that are bigger will coil them up. But I'm just rolling these up and putting them in the UTV trailer.
And then we take them down to the barn and we just lay them
Yeah,
flat
just
down
store
there.
them somewhere. And I'm trying to get rid of this, like, as I go, because otherwise it just piles up back here, and then grass starts to grow in them, and it just becomes a mess.
It's pretty amazing, though, that these probably were there for 30 years and we could still use them, albeit for a different kind of cause where the deer are going to have a hard time still breaking into them because they're just smaller fences.
Yeah, but the fence we're replacing it with is a thicker gauge wire, and even if that rusts, I think it will still be strong enough.
And it's
for deer.
woven, right?
And it's woven, so, you know, the problem is with this welded stuff is like, these break, they snap
They're
apart.
brittle.
The joints. And then it's just a bunch of wires, and they're not strong enough on their own, so they just bust right through. Like it's kind of like the woven one is kind of like a deer trampoline, I call it, because if they run into it with full force, like they just bounce back. It's like, it's kind of crazy to see. It kind of sucks that we're doing this like in the winter, but it's probably the best time to do it because the ground's frozen. You're not in the mud all day. There's no foliage everywhere to, you know, be in the way. You can clearly see everything.
No ticks.
No ticks messing with you.
And we need to do it before the tulips come
And
up.
you need to do it before the spring and before everything starts growing. So this is the perfect way to do it. Another thing we did here is we actually took a lot of multiflora and honeysuckle out because we can walk on the pond now because it's frozen.
Yeah, I was sharing that with everyone.
We were able to just like drag it all out on the pond, which is a huge flat area, and then just drag it over here, and we burned it all to get rid of it. And that would be a nightmare to do in the summer or in the spring, having to go through this forest with all those trees. And so.
Yeah, what do you think about this being turned into an ice skating rink in the winter months? The ice right now is really thick. It's kind of like ice, and then there's a little bit of water in between, and then ice again. It's like doubly iced. Kind of funky when we were walking on it. All right, let's go check out what the guys are doing, and I'll show you some of the fence they're putting in, sophisticated fence that they're putting in. We checked it out yesterday. Looks really good. All right, well, Whitmore fence is at it again. So we're gonna show you some of the updates to the fence, give them a little PR because they've been really helping us with this deer fence, some of the harder places. All right, so what's really exciting is that this used to be the fence line, but we're actually going to be pushing it back into the forest. So if you recall, this is where I showed you that we're going to potentially have a duck, dove, chicken coop. This area here, which is, you know, basically all covered in snow. And here, next to it is where we're going to have the agroforestry section, where we could have persimmons and pawpaws and ramps and mushrooms and things like that. It's about 40 paces from this barn and maybe 280 paces from the main common house. And it's pretty easy to get back into, but you know, we had this fence here and it was a really hard gate to open, so we just never really came back here. But we do maintain it. Now I'm going to show you where the fence is going to be. So this is going to be a nice walk path into the woods, and we'll have a gate that opens into the woods, as you can see here. So this is eventually going to be a gate. We'll reuse one of our own old gates, and so it'll be big enough that a UTV or tractor could go through. Wow. Well, can you imagine the mud back here in the springtime?
Yeah, it's good that they did it when they did it.
That is a lot of posts.
And I like what they did here because this holds the, this is kind of a corner, it holds the fence because this is a really long run. But then we got this giant tree here that's gonna hopefully prevent this thing from like wanting to fall. So we got this giant tree here to kind of help out, hold the post where it should be, but the post in theory should be strong enough on its own to hold it. So, I mean, these are massive trees. They aren't going anywhere.
This is funny. Look at this little goalpost that they put up
They
here
are legends.
to elevate the tree.
Yeah, the guy was like, it's like, we have these branches hanging right through the fence, and they're so nice because they're like wispy and they make the fence kind of disappear if it's here. But they're kind of in the way. And he's like, oh, can I do like a football post kind of thingy to hold them up? And now we look at this and then.
That's great because this is a pretty tree. It's
yeah, we don't want to cut this. This is actually a tree that's a pine, but it's straight.
Somewhat straight. It has a little J curve up there, but not much.
Whereas all the others are like
that had been probably previously cut down. Oh, look at all the posts right there. And they basically strung all this fence line. So the other day we were kind of showing you these corner posts. This is the handy dandy machine that they've welded together so that they could pull the fence. And you could see that this is what Sonder means by woven wire versus a welded wire. So you could see that this is woven together and it's different sizes so that some animals could get through, but not the deer. And then you'll see that they did quite the job. This whole fence, they said this is one of the longer fences that they've ever ran. Unbelievable. And I want to thank Deer Busters because they have given us the opportunity to get this 8-foot woven wire black fence. So if you stand back, you almost can't see the fence in the woods because it's just invisible. I mean, right now you could see it because they're filming in winter and it's against snow. So it's that black against the white, but they have to staple this together basically, but they were able to pull it. It just keeps on going and going. So if you see some of our earlier deer fence videos, they basically ended it way in the woods back there. We couldn't afford any more of it. So we're really excited. We said, you know what? We're investing so much in the landscaping and the trees and the crops, and they keep on getting murdered by the deer. So, you know, this is our investment into it, an investment in also being able to restore some of the forest because we have some really great white pines, we have some great white oaks, northern red oaks, beautiful shagbark hickories, and none of them could actually come up because they're just being eaten by the deer. I'll show you some of the deer damage now that happens when you let them run amok. So this will give you an example. This is one of our blueberries. It's not fenced, and you can see how much little nibbles. I don't know if this will ever fruit or if it'll leaf out again. So that's a shame. Let's go check out the rhododendrons over here. So you'll notice that the rhododendrons have their leaves. These do keep their leaves throughout the winter. And it's pretty amazing how they do that. But down below, you'll see that there are no leaves. And it's because the deer have come up at browsing height and have eaten all of them. Now this happened the year that we got here because we were not able to safeguard this area. We had no idea that it was going to be so bad. And the rhododendrons really didn't produce for a year after that. And then they rebounded. So my hope is that these will rebound. It's really sad. But we couldn't put another, it's just like putting all these individual fences around plants. I'll show you some other bad ones that happened. So this whole area, you'll remember, we kind of left when the tulips came up, but there weren't many tulips this past year because the deer got to them and they basically ate all of them. They're like deer lollipops. Now, this is sad because these will never regrow their leaves. This has been completely obliterated. And look at this, so has this. So I'm gonna have to replace some of these trees, unfortunately. These have all been attacked by deer. Some of the coniferous plants, again, once these leaves are eaten, they're not really growing back. So this one is looking really sparse. It's not the deer's choice of food, but it's because they're so desperate. And you'll also see here, look, there is absolutely no leaves left on this beautiful plant. So the rose bush, everything, I mean, everything's just been nibbled on, even the ends of this tree around the deer browse line. It's really frustrating because you spend so much money on it and then making it look really beautiful, and then the deer come in one day and it's all done. All right, I'll show you the other project that we're working on. Oh shoot, look at this. Looks like the lilac branch broke here. Oh, this is really sad. It's one of the best lilac bushes we have. So you can see that big branch just broke off. I mean, we've been having some really cold snaps and really bad ice. So yeah, both of these off. It's unfortunate. Oh, I will show you something else that we've done before I go to the other section. We limbed up this oak tree. So some of the best time to cut these hardwoods are in the winter so that you don't invite any kind of bacteria or fungal infections. So you can see that we limbed it up. Makes it easier for us to walk and mow under, and it just has a healthier look to it now. Some of those bottom branches were unsightly and ungainly, so didn't have many leaves on it because it was getting shaded out, so that looks a lot nicer. Okay, I'll show you the last project we're working on. Sorry, this is some of our wild cornice, but you could see all the tips completely munched on by deer. Luckily, cornice responds to munching, but if it's constantly being munched year over year, then it's going to stunt its growth. Okay, I'll be walking over to the absolute other end of the property here, which is on the south side. By the way, I have to tell you, we caught a skunk on camera, and it was a nearly all black skunk, which is interesting. I looked into it. There's a hypothesis that skunks that are nearly black have less predator pressure. I don't know how true that is though, because we also have a nearly white one here that is just, both of them are gorgeous. So it's nice to see them. I'll see if I could find some of the video footage of it at night. Anyway, so this was a problem area. You could see that it's bulged up here. And this area had been the designated compost heap for the folks who were here before us. Remember, this was a plant nursery, so they would throw all this old soil and plant matter and trees. And then when we got here, when we had to remove some trees and stuff, we had to do the same. We said, where are we going to throw it? Well, we'll throw it back on this massive, kind of like hugel mound. You can see some animals are climbing up it already. We had our neighbor come over and use his bucket and basically smooth it out, create a walk path behind it. And you can see that this is some of the old fence line that we're resalvaging. Sandra and I set all these posts, and it goes into the woods here along the property line. And all this old fence material right here, which is where the fence used to be, is going to be coming out. So now we were working with the soil, and unfortunately it has snow on top of it. But you know, this has been sitting here like a hugel mound for like 30 plus years, and the soil is just so beautiful. I mean, there are like plastic things here and there in it because they threw in like some of the planters and stuff like that, but otherwise the soil is really nice. So I'd like for the snow to melt at least for one day so I could seed this area. I have a bunch of beautiful seeds that I'd like to put in here. This is very shady back here because you have all these Scotch pines, really ugly Scotch pines, unfortunately. I think the government paid people to plant these at some point, and so there's like just this monoculture of Scotch pine behind here. But I'd like to have some native seeds in this area that are a bit more adept at growing in shade, and we'll see how that is. But I'm so excited. I mean, look at the way this fence looks. It's so bad. But Sandra and I were talking, we said, oh, we could use maybe this curved one, which is actually still in good shape. It's just really curved, as maybe like a little bridge that we could use, maybe. And yeah, this just looks really trashy back here. So, I mean, we kind of did some real quick fixes. We have ratchet straps and we have pallets and old birdhouses that need to be rekindled with some love. Oh, yeah, but anyway, so this is going to be a really big section to garden. I don't know how many square foot it is, but it's really nice. And then if it could seed into this part of the meadow, which didn't get seeded, that's going to be really nice. So just for direction, you can see the big barn that we renovated down there. That's the meadow house. Up here are the 4 barns, and that's the common house right there. And behind that is all of the half lake and where we're doing some fencing. So all of this area, the north, the west, and the south, is going to be finished with deer fencing. So hopefully that will work. Ugh, fingers crossed.